What's up, everyone? Welcome to Normal America Show. I'm home. I made it. I made it out of work. Oh, what a rough one it's been. It's been one of the. Sometimes you get a year's worth of crazy stuff that happens within a week or two of work, and it's been that. So thank you all for your prayers for one of the people I work with. There's some health issues in the immediacy, but also some systemic long-term health issues. And at least in the immediacy, it looks like that issue is starting to get better. The long-term stuff, it's going to take a while to see if we end up in a good place. Yeah, go Rams. My brother in real life. Yeah, Black Elk has done a fantastic job with the intros. I was supposed to call Black Elk this past weekend, and I totally dropped the ball on that. So, Black Elk, if you're watching this, give me a ring tonight, or just text me, and I'll give you a ring tonight after the show. But it's just been an absolute crazy week at work, and like streaming was the last thing on my mind most of the time. So, but now I'm back home. Everything's better here at home. So, ready to move forward. Got a jam-packed stream tonight. Now, normally we're probably going to cover a lot tonight that I would normally break up into two sections. But tomorrow night I'm supposed to have a debate. I will, in fact, if you give me a moment, I can tell you who that debate's supposed to be with. It is, give me a second. Let's see, well, this isn't going to help me. His name's Adam. Here, it's this guy. I'll show you a screen share. But I don't know his channel or anything like that. There you go. He's this guy in the bottom right corner. But that is the channel I'll be debating on, Jake Rattlesnake, who's a good guy. So, yeah, I'm not going to do any debate prep at all. I'll explain why in a second. So I'm streaming tonight because I owe people a stream, and I want to stream tonight. And then we'll get on to tomorrow. Anyways, doing that. So that'll be tomorrow night around 8 p.m. I'm going to finish this stream today. Tomorrow I'm jam-packed full of good stuff. My parents, and I don't know, maybe Go Rams will be with them. I'm not sure. We're going to be taking my son to meet the Easter Bunny tomorrow, and that's going to be sort of an all-day adventure. Then I got a couple of errands to run sort of after that. So I'll probably be wrapping up dinner right around 7:30, and then hopping on to stream. And the debate's supposed to take place at, I believe, 8 p.m. Eastern. Let's see. Thursday, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Yeah. So should be fun. I'm looking forward to it. And I don't even know what the topic is necessarily. That doesn't bother me though. Debate on my channel with a lib about whether Trump's first few months have been good or bad. Okay. That's a fine topic. So we'll be doing that. Adam, if you're watching, I'll give you a little spoiler into what my answer will be. I would say good, but it's hard to determine. Trump's set a lot of building blocks that can lead to good, but just because you set those blocks doesn't mean that things are taken to fruition. This is one of the things that Democrats did all the time when I debated them. They would say, like, I remember debating Destiny in 2022. I debated a bunch of other lefties, 2022, 2023. And when they would talk about how great Biden was doing, you would be like, by what metric? And they would say things like, well, he passed the Inflation Reduction Act. He passed this massive infrastructure bill. And it's like, okay, let's take the infrastructure bill. Theoretically, if that largely contributes to building a lot of infrastructure that's worthwhile, then you would say, okay, that's a good thing. But if you just earmark, say, $47 billion for rural broadband, and then not one person gets connected, you can't say when that bill passes, oh, this is a huge victory, what a success, because you have to see what happens. The same with the Inflation Reduction Act. Yeah, in theory, a bill that would lower inflation would be a good thing. That's not what the Inflation Reduction Act did. But when you asked, and by the way, Trump supporters will do the same thing. When you're like, well, what are the accomplishments? Well, look at all this legislation that's passed. But you haven't even had time. The truth is, we're only, 2 months, 3 months into Trump's presidency? It's really hard to put a grade on, like, have things been good or bad? There are metrics that you could use. I don't mind bringing up the stock market if that's one of the things my opponent wants to do. I'm assuming it will be. You could certainly bring up the progress that we've seen already on the border. That's something I plan on bringing up. But for me, the things that would make a, quote, good Trump presidency would be weeding out corruption at the FBI, bringing manufacturing jobs back home, those sorts of things. Has that happened yet? No. Have the building blocks been laid that may make that a possibility? Sure. But, well, people that are just never going to want to criticize Trump will be like, he appointed Kash Patel. That's great. Well, yeah, if Kash does something. If he doesn't, then it wasn't great, right? So, I mean, I'm excited with some of the possibilities. On other hands, seeing as how corruption is my big issue, on other hands, they just appointed this Jensen character high up in the FBI. This is one of the big January 6th people that went after people on January 6th. Does that sound like some guy who wants reform? No. Have we gotten access to the Epstein files yet? No. So it's a little, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm not going to just be a prick that goes on there. It's like, best presidency ever, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to say there's a lot that I could defend here. There's a couple things I'm not a fan of, but there's a lot I could defend that I think things are going pretty well. But it's just the beginning, and things could turn sour near immediately. Even if you just look in a bubble at this tariff situation, I'm not going to be one of these people that sit here and bullshits you and say 100% guarantee this will be a disaster, 100% guarantee this is foolproof. I can't say that. What I did, and I'll continue to do tonight, is to look at it through my layman's lens and tell you what I think is likely to occur, what's going through Trump's head, what's going through people's heads. But I can't tell you that there's going to be 100% success or failure based on this. Any sort of radical change, changing the economy radically, is probably going to upset the stock market and upset a lot of investors. Why? Because investors want predictability. So, for example, something that I was a big fan of for years, maybe some people in my audience will feel the same way, I wanted to end the Federal Reserve. What do you think that would do to the stock market? Like if Ron Paul would have won in 2012 and he comes in within 3 months, he's like, okay, we're ending the Fed. What do you think that does to the stock market? What do you think that does to the bond market? Cold slice of bread, I don't think that's necessarily the case. So, I mean, I certainly think that would be detrimental in the immediacy to the stock market. I think for the long-term health of the country, it would be far better. Real quick, to answer your question, cold slice bread, I believe, I asked people to clip this a couple weeks ago when I talked about the Alien Enemy Act business. I believe the Supreme Court ruled almost identically to what I said would happen, which would be that they would say they had problems with the jurisdiction, which is what they said. So Boasberg sort of inserting himself when he knew he shouldn't have, that he didn't have jurisdiction. There were problems with that. But ultimately, they said that due process was entitled to people to be deported under the Alien Enemy Act, which I agree with. They should deserve due process. And they're defining due process as basically the right to hear the charges and then to defend themselves from that. Now, unless there was another case that I'm unaware of, Cold Slice, if that's where you're saying that all illegals get 2 million, all 20 million illegals get a trial before they're deported, that's not my understanding. First off, even when it comes to those being deported under the Alien Enemy Act, it's not a trial that they're entitled to. It's some sort of hearing, which is different. It will require a different standard of proof than, say, being convicted beyond a reasonable doubt, right? The second is that's only referring to the Alien Enemy Act provision, which was one of my arguments from the get-go. There's a reason that Trump wanted to invoke the Alien Enemy Act, probably because to expedite the process, so we would be able to have a way to avoid other court challenges, etc., to the deportation of illegals in general. But for me, it was always an issue of, I have no problem with deporting illegals whatsoever. I think that you should easily be able to prove whether someone's here has a legal status or not. If they don't, goodbye. Simple. Should be a very quick, simple procedure. Now, you should have to prove that they're illegal. I don't want them just grabbing people in the street saying, you might be illegal, we'll kick you out. But once you prove that they're illegal, which would be a very quick process, and most of these people, they'll know beforehand their legal status, then get rid of them. But if you're going to go the extra mile and accuse them of basically being a terrorist, they should have some mechanism to understand that they're being charged with that and to say, what is your proof? And here's my defense. So I don't think that this is really, it's not just for criminals. It's for the very small subsect of people that will be deported under the Alien Enemies Act. So that's what I think of that. Anyways, we're going to talk about tariffs today. Cody Folsom, thanks so much for the $5. Says, hope all is well, Rob. Trump is just pissing in the wind. We'll get to it. I think I got a good read on Trump. We'll see. I don't think my read, I haven't heard anyone else make my exact claims, what I'm going to say. Yeah, no problem, cold slice of bread. Now, I'm no attorney, so take it for granted, but that's my belief on what's gone on. And I think that attorneys that I listen to that try to be more level-headed, like Shipwrecked, I think he's been very good about this. And so anyways, on to the tariffs. So here's the deal. First, if you listen to me stream Monday, I didn't have a lot of time to read specifically what was going on with the tariffs because of my crazy work situation. But I did sort of talk about here in rural America, the general conversation that's going about Wall Street versus Main Street. Now, I said that I don't want anyone to lose their job. I don't care if they're in an artsy-fartsy Hollywood job that hates my way of life. I don't really cheer for people losing their jobs, even government employees. I think certainly as the people whose taxes go to pay government employees, and many of those employees are working jobs that are literally antithetical to my belief system. For example, they're working on censoring disinformation online, which is tantamount to censoring populists like me. Yeah. That person shouldn't have a job. Or they're doing jobs that's redundant or not really benefiting the country. Yeah, you should be let go. But I don't celebrate in the sense that it's like, ha ha, you're poor, you're on the street. It's not really the business I'm in. If you want to do that, by all means, I'm not judging you for that. But, and I do think that it is a mistake to cheer for the intentional disruption of Wall Street. I think that's a mistake. One, because I don't want to see rich people lose money either. I would like to see the wealth disparity shrink, but I'm not someone who looks like, billionaires are all evil, screw them all. I'm not saying that. And secondly, because believe it or not, Wall Street, although it's certainly not the end all be all indicator, and it's certainly been overinflated through government printing of money, etc., there is connection to how that affects average people, not just through their 401ks. Wall Street is predictive of what people think the market will do. And if Wall Street collapses a lot, it may mean that people are less willing to take risk for their money, which means that job creation, things like that, would be less likely, innovation less likely to occur. So in many ways, it is interconnected. If you had to pick one, like either Wall Street does good or Main Street does good, of course I care more about Main Street, but it doesn't mean that I want Wall Street to collapse. I hope that came across when I was talking about that the other day. Having said that, I was giving what I think is the view from people from rural America and what we think. That's what Tom knows. Tom, I think I could say this. I don't think Tom will be mad. Tom Kennedy in the chat there, he was my campaign manager. He's a dirty, dirty Democrat. He's like a centrist. But he was my campaign manager when I ran for Congress. Also one of my debate partners. And that was the argument we made all the time, business confidence. If the market is unpredictable, if businesses don't have a standard predictable thing that they could look forward to going, they're not going to invest money. In fact, most businesses would be more willing to pay a higher tax rate that they're able to know, okay, this will be the rate for 20 years, than to have the rate go up and then down and then up and then down and then up and then down, because they're not able to factor in that unpredictability into their business models. But nonetheless, I do think here in rural Pennsylvania and rural America, there are a lot of these communities have been hollowed out, and we're sort of tired of no one giving, two cares in the world to the problems that we're facing here. And it comes across as hollow when you see a lot of people that have done remarkably well over the past 4 years, or for that matter, 2 decades, that are saying like, well, how dare Trump, try to focus on manufacturing jobs. No one wants those jobs, and who cares anyways? And, you're not entitled to those jobs, and blah, blah, blah. Like, for people around here, it's just like, go screw yourself. And the same's true of a lot of young people. A lot of young people that feel like owning a home's out of the possibility, that they're going to be in perpetual debt. Maybe they did make a dumb decision and they got a stupid major that didn't help them out. But understand, many of them, they're still young when they're making that decision, 17, 18, old enough to get into a financial, they understand, or they should understand the financial situation they're getting into. But you're still following advice of your parents, of your teachers, or whatever coming out of high school. I went to college and I graduated high school in 2002. That's how much of an old man I am. Even back then, everyone was telling me, you got to go to college. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was like, I guess I'll do media. I wanted to do like sports media. I wasn't heavily involved in politics. I fell into debate. I like debate. That's what I ended up changing my major to. And, now I have a master's degree in speech communication, basically debate. Guess what I use it for? Nothing. I have a job that I could have a GED to have. So, my master's degree is completely worthless as far as my career. Nonetheless, there is a lot of anger and resentment in these communities that you look back at our grandfathers' generations, and there's thriving communities around here, and now they're hollowed out. And it's not just in rural America. It's places like Gary, Indiana. I didn't know this. I was reading. Did you know, like in the 50s and the 60s, Detroit was the wealthiest city in the country? And now, it's starting to revitalize a little, but the stereotype about Detroit, like circa 2005, 2010, was that it was like a hole. Yeah, I'm still paying off student debt. Yeah. So I was just trying to impart that there is resentment, but I don't want people to get the wrong idea. There are certainly a lot of people that have the burn it all to the ground mentality when it comes to the economy. Hey, if the economy doesn't work for me, I don't care. Screw everyone. I'm not in that camp. I'm in that camp when it comes to like the FBI. I'm in that camp when it comes to like funding universities, but I'm not in that camp with the economy, where it's like, we are all interconnected to some degree. But anyways, that's the point that I was trying to come across Monday. As far as the tariffs specific, I had to fully admit I had not, because of being busy at work and on vacation last week, I haven't read through the particulars of a lot of it. I think I was correct, though someone tried to correct me. One little thing I said, there's these people that constantly, like on my videos, they'll comment, they're like hate commentators, and so every day they have something with me to say. Notice I open pretty much more than any other channel I'm aware of, I open up for call-ins. They're always too cowardly to call in, but one of the things they said was I had mentioned that it was sort of ham-fisted the way that these tariffs were calculated, the retaliatory tariffs. It seemed as if it was just them taking the trade deficit number and then having that percent. So if we have a 90% trade deficit with Vietnam, we say, oh, we're going to put 45% tariff on Vietnam. That's half of what they do to us. Well, no. Now, it is true that people's aggressive trade policies against the United States or unfair trade policies can include more than tariffs. For example, let's say that you're a country and you say, well, we won't allow U.S. steel into our country because they use a certain manufacturing process that we don't think safe. So there's not a tariff on U.S. steel. There's just, because of regulations we have in our country, we won't accept that. Maybe that's true of agriculture. You feed your cows something, so we won't take your beef. Or your corn is genetically modified, and so we won't accept it, etc. Those could fall into what Trump would be referring to as unfair trade practices. But what Trump was doing was, it wasn't just that. He's basically saying, we want our trade deficit with every country to be zero. So if we buy $100 billion of stuff from France, then they better be buying $100 billion of stuff from us. And that was the equation that they were basically using. Someone correctly points out that no, because there are certain countries that there was still a 10% tariff on that don't fit that criteria. Okay, yes. It started off with a 10% baseline for everyone, and then the way they judged it after the 10% was that deficit number. At least it seems that that's the case. Now, my feelings on tariffs were at least Trump's trying something. I think that there is an unsustainable future if we were to continue with the status quo in two ways. Well, three really. One, which arguably is the least important, which is weird for me to say, is the hollowed out of rural America and blue collar America for the people that live here. But let's table that. We already talked about that. The other two reasons were the unsustainable debt and deficits, where we're going to end up once we refinance this $9 trillion of debt that we incurred under Biden, the massive printing of the money, inflation, et cetera, et cetera. The interest on the debt is going to be one of the biggest payments that we're making every year. And eventually that will outpace the other things that we're spending that we're told is necessary. So that's number one. It's not sustainable. It's just not. And the way they're trying to fight that is just to continue to print more money, which leads to more inflation, which devalues dollars, which leads to more wealth inequality, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing was that there are certain things that we should be manufacturing in this country that are sort of necessities that we're reliant on other countries that are basically our rivals, our enemies, such as steel from places like China, or ammunition, or simple medications. We're relying on this country, China, that's supposedly our biggest enemy. So what would happen if we end up in a hot war with China? Hey, excuse us. Could you, before the shooting starts, can you make sure to ship us some extra bullets? That stuff's not sustainable in a world of geopolitical rivals. And unfortunately, because the leadership of this country has hollowed out this country, foreign manufacturing and the working class, it's also diminished the United States' status as the world's sole hegemonic superpower when it comes to both hard power and soft power. We are not the military superpower that we were in 95. We're not. You could blame whoever you want. I blame both parties' leadership. So the status quo was not sustainable. So I applaud Trump for at least trying something to radically shift the status quo, because I think that as the years go on, the United States isn't going to fall into some like third world hellhole, but it's going to lose its unique status as the world superpower, and it's going to regress to the mean. And so our bargaining potential now is higher than it will ever be. It was probably higher 10 years ago. Having said that, where I step apart from Trump is I think that tariffs in the long run are ultimately harmful. And I think as a negotiating tactic, it's fine. You want to have reciprocal tariffs, reciprocal trade, that I get. I think that Trump's going a little too far saying, no, we want zero deficit, trade deficit with anyone else. I don't know that that's possible or even desirable, but I guess I'd have to listen to intelligent people on the economy have that debate in front of me before I could make a judgment. But to me, my gut says there's nothing wrong with us having trade deficits with certain countries. Nonetheless, as a bargaining tool, I don't have a problem with it. And so that's ultimately where I stood. Now let's enter today. There are two possibilities, right, of Trump rescinding. If you haven't been following the news today, stock market, highest Dow Jones increase in market history today. Thank you, Donald Trump. Best day in stock market history. Thank you, Trump. We'll get to that more here in the future. I'm being a little facetious, but you'll understand why. Of course, Andrew Haskins says, love you, Rob, but the whole point about tariffs is to get to where we're selling other people's stuff. Yes, I don't disagree. Obviously, that's the idea, and that's the right idea. We want to bring back manufacturing, and we want to make sure that there aren't barriers set up so that U.S. industry could be profitable selling to other countries. We want to get away from a world where so much of the rest of the world owns parts of the United States, is investing in the United States, and we're not doing that to countries around the world. But does that mean that we can have a zero trade deficit? No, I don't think so. Maybe overall that's the goal, but country to country, I don't know. But clearly that's the idea, right? That's what's going on. I don't disagree with that. Okay. So the two options are, now that Trump sort of said, okay, we're going to continue to hammer China because they've retaliated. But every other country in the world, we're going to, I think, limit to that 10% and halt all the other tariffs. And the market's just rebounded like crazy, right? So the two options are, this was always Trump's plan, that he's playing 4D chess and he saw ahead. He's like, how do we encircle China like Reagan did to the Soviet Union? This is how we do it. We get the rest of the world. Part of the negotiating is, hey, now you know we're serious about tariffs. You're going to lower a lot of your tariffs and barriers to trade with us. You're going to engage in trade treaties that say, we agree to buy so much of your agricultural products, so much of your manufactured products, etc. And in addition to that, you're going to agree to purchase less of that stuff from China. And so maybe that's a way to, and it may very well work out that way. So option one is, this was all 4D chess, Trump planned this out. Option two is, Trump backed down. Trump's plan was actually the Peter Navarro plan, who's one of his sort of team members, which is, no, we don't even give a shit. We're not interested in negotiating. Tariffs are good for their own sake. We want tariffs. Even if other countries are willing to go to zero tariffs and zero trade barriers, screw that, we still want tariffs. And that one of the reasons he was doing that was bonds, and he is looking at the bond market and seeing, the interest rate's not going to decrease. And so he cowardly backed down. Corey Barton for $2 says, I'm starting to think tariffs are working. We'll get to that in a second here. And then he says, for another $2, I also think tariffs reveal foreign weak leaders. Maybe. So which of those two things are true? I'll ask my audience. Do you think it's the red pill or the blue pill? Do you think type of 1, if you think that this was all Trump's plan all along? Or type of 2, if you think he saw it wasn't working, and so now he's backing out? One is, this was Trump's plan all along, it's working exactly as he planned, or basically as he's planned. Or two is that he backed out. Oh, Tone Docs is going with Rob's option. Yeah, I choose neither as well. I don't think it's either of those. Or rather, I think it's a combination of them. How about that? Now, for the people that say number one, they correctly point out that Trump's basically told everyone his negotiating strategy ever since he wrote Art of the Deal, and even before then. It's always the same with Trump. He identifies a problem, and most of the time he's right, there's a problem. Then he makes an outlandish, boisterous claim, right? He makes a demand that is ridiculous. We're going to take Greenland. We're taking it over. We'll use the military if we have to. Chronicle Lives for $5 says, does the Dems' accusation of market manipulation hold water? No, I don't think so. Right? So he'll say, we're going to tariff everything. We're going to tariff the shit out of everything. We don't care. No negotiations whatsoever. Then that forces people to come to the table. It allows him to have sort of what is seen as a compromise. And then he ends up getting the resolution that he always sort of wanted, but it's seen as if he had to give something up. And in effect, regardless of if you think that this was all part of Trump's plan or not, or if you think that he backed out, it may end up working exactly like that. Because we just saw, if Trump had immediately came out and announced, okay, 10% tariff across the board to every country and 104% tariff against China, what do you think markets would have done? What would the national conversation have been? I think that the conversation would have been, this is bad. That's too far. Too much too soon. I think that's what they would have said. Now, instead, that's where we're at today. Granted, we went through a lot of market turmoil. We still haven't recovered from where we started. But the conversation today is like, oh, thank God, this is reasonable. And so you could say, that's the art of the deal. That's what he does. That's what he told us he did. Sounds good. But I don't think that's what happened. Option two, that Trump saw the bond market, he saw the problems in the stock market, and he was like, oh shit, things aren't going as we anticipated. And so he's like, well, let's pull out and save face. So you have all of Trump's people today saying this was the plan all along. But when they asked Trump himself and he spoke today, they were like, the bond market. He's like, yeah, it's unpredictable. Yeah. And it seemed that he was suggesting we've changed course. Now, that's entirely how that would go if there was a changing of course. If Trump did have a meeting with his team like yesterday and like there's like, Mr. President, we don't think that this is going to work out the way that maybe you thought. Like the stock is going to keep tanking. We don't think the bond market's going to get any better. People are losing faith, particularly Japan is selling treasuries. We think this is a huge problem. Okay, reverse course. How can we save face? Well, the way you would do that is you would have your leaders go out and spin a story, or your team go out and say, oh, this was part of the plan all along. See, now we've isolated China, the rest of the world against China, and we're willing to negotiate with all these countries called us. We're willing to, it's a big win. And it's not necessarily in this world, but that's how they're going to spin it. But at the same time, like him or hate him, Trump is almost transparent to a fault. And he doesn't give a shit if he tells his team to go out and be disciplined and stay on message. He's going to say whatever he feels like. So this is how it would sound. Trump's team saying, no, trust us, it's all part of the plan. And then Trump just shooting his mouth off like, whatever. So there's evidence for that position. I think that it went something like this. I think that much when it comes to the Second Amendment and other things, more than Trump is ideological, and make no mistake about it, when it comes to the Second Amendment, hell, even when it comes to the First Amendment and things of that nature, Trump's not really ideological. He is ideological when it comes to trade. He has a philosophy. Tariffs are part of that philosophy. But even more than he's ideological, he's a deal maker. And he's willing to compromise. And like him or hate him, the most important thing to Trump is he wants to be a winner. He wants to be seen as someone who's doing great things. So I think what's likely to happen was this. I think that Trump's listening to his advisors. Trump's thought for years that China was ripping off the United States first and foremost. He thinks that NAFTA and deals like that were terrible and they hollowed out middle America. He wants to be a champion for the manufacturing in the United States. He wants every business in the world to come to the United States and build factories and do their business here. He does want all of that. But he's sort of shooting from the hip. And he knows we'll start off with the most aggressive posture possible, and then we'll play it by ear. We'll see what happens. We're willing to throw out large parts of this plan if enough people say, hey, it's not working. That's what I think's basically going on. There's some semblance of a plan, but it can adjust at any point on the fly. Trump just doesn't give a shit. That's what I think's happening. I think it's like bump stocks. Remember that? Trump's like, yeah, what's going on in Vegas? This Vegas shooting, whatever. Let's get rid of bump stocks. And then all of his supporters are like, what the hell are you doing? And he's like, all right. That's what I think's basically going on. 1 second, I got a work message here I got to read. Okay. Yeah, I agree with this take, AJ. He mostly just wanted to force the issue to renegotiate. Exactly. That's what I think was going on. He was like, the status quo's not working. Let's just throw shit at the wall. Let's change the conversation. The other thing that Trump has going for him is, it's the same thing that he had going for him with foreign policy. Does anyone remember? Yeah, Tom, I don't disagree. I think that's basic. I think this was eventually where they wanted to get, but I think they wanted to hold out longer. Tom says, I think this is what they meant to do, but they ended up pulling the trigger early and used the 10% in China to save face. Yeah, but it's not really saving. I mean, it's saving face, but I think this was the intent all along. Does anyone remember why Trump, again, I think he's full of shit, but why Trump said that he hired John Bolton in his first term? I think it was a huge mistake. I think Trump hired Bolton because Bolton kissed his ass. I think it's that simple. But why? What was Trump's sort of post hoc explanation of why he liked John Bolton there? Does anyone remember this? Right. He said Bolton scared people. Because when he goes in and he negotiates with, adversaries, there's John Bolton in the back of the room just like, we can't wait to bomb you. And so Trump's basically like, hey, this guy's one of my advisors. Remember, one of the criticisms I had early with this Trump administration was, I don't have a problem with retaliatory tariffs. That I don't have a problem with. If we can prove that this country's tariffing or putting up trade barriers of roughly 20%, I don't have a problem with putting up trade barriers to their country that are sort of equivocal. That's fine. With the idea of hopefully both sides' tariffs being eliminated. That would be ultimately the goal. And other trade barriers. That would be the goal. That includes things like subsidies. More free trade. Fine with that, right? But one of the problems is with the tariffs against Canada and Mexico on fentanyl they weren't even pretended to be like sort of transactional or equivocal. It was like, no, it's because of fentanyl. And I was like, but he hasn't really said what the bright line is. Like, what exactly do they need to do to eliminate these tariffs? And ultimately, I think it comes down to kiss his ass enough. Or let me put it in a more favorable way for Trump. Signal to him enough that they're willing to work with him. But we were talking on that one show about that, and then we were talking about Venezuela. Remember, they weren't going to take the deported people back to Venezuela, and Trump was like, then tariffs! And they were like, oh, okay, we'll take those people. I think Ecuador, it was the same story. And what I said was, eventually, if tariffs are going to be such a key part of Trump's strategy, he has to do it to someone. He has to. Because if the rest of the world thinks Trump's just threatening this, he won't pull through, because if he does, it'll collapse the U.S. market. He ain't going to do that. It'll cost him the midterms, so he ain't going to do it. Then the threat of tariff loses its power, because they're going to be like, look, at the end of the day, Trump's not going to go through with it. So he needed that John Bolton type. He needed them to be like, oh shit, this guy's unpredictable. He may just say fuck it. If that's the case, you're not going to have, you can't go on national TV if you're Bessonnet or any of these other people and be like, well, ultimately, what Trump's really looking for is to negotiate, get a negotiated deal. You're going to be like, no, Trump's going to go, he's going to do the tariffs regardless. Because you don't want Europe to just come to you, or Vietnam or South Korea or Japan or China or Australia or Canada or Mexico and say, okay, well, if you're starting from the position of, our 10% tariff's too much, we're willing to lower it to 5%. You want to start from the position of, you're fucked anyways. We're tariffing you. The best deal you will get will still end up with you having a 20% tariff. Because if you start from that position, all of a sudden you could get to the position that you hypothetically want, which is, we want you to agree to buy more shit from the United States and eliminate your tariffs. So when you have people like Peter Navarro that are out there like, no. The strategy is tariffs. We want to replace the income tax totally with tariffs. And when you have Vietnam come out right out of the gate and it's like, hey, we're willing to eliminate all of our tariffs. And Trump's team was like, that's a non-starter. What do you mean a non-starter? Nope. Not even willing to have the discussion. I think that ultimately was the plan. I think the plan was ultimately to have negotiations, but to make the rest of the world think for a month or two, this shit's happening. Yes, we know there's going to be short-term pain. We don't give a shit. That's what the Trump administration's position was going to be. Now, I had said that the reason that ultimately I think that this strategy won't work is because the rest of the world will understand having a republic or a representative democracy in the United States, we have elections every 2 years. We elect a president every 4 years. And if they could hold out for 2 years, knowing that this would cause enough pain in the United States, even if it caused more pain around the world than it is in the United States, that ultimately Trump's allies would lose in the midterm elections, and then that would force a change. And I said, and aside from that, Trump's ally or Trump's fellow Republicans that are going to be against this would be his biggest impediment. So I ultimately thought, I don't think it's going to work. I applaud Trump for trying something, because I think had Kamala won or had pretty much any other president won the primary other than maybe J.D. Vance, nothing would have changed. We would have just proceeded with the status quo, which is not sustainable. So better to rip the Band-Aid off now. That doesn't mean that ripping the Band-Aid off is always going to lead to the desired outcome, but at least it's an attempt. And I think ultimately what happened was that more than they expected, they're reading the tea leaves, and it was going to cause more short-term pain than they anticipated. Not just with the stock market, but more importantly with the bond market. So I think it's a combination of 1 and 2. I think that it was sort of 4D chess in that ultimately the goal, despite the bluster, was to get to the negotiating table. But I also think that goal was to seriously put these tariffs in effect for at least a month or two so that the rest of the world knew, like, look, we fucking mean business. This isn't just some idle threat. And I think ultimately they were forced to change. And I do think that probably part of that was trying to get sort of an international coalition to stand up to China. So I think that they ultimately got there, but they're not starting off from the position they wanted. I think they wanted to make Europe feel the pain, to make Canada, Mexico feel more pain for a couple months and say, we could weather the storm. The United States will be better off than these countries. And it'll lower interest rates so that when we have to refinance this $9 trillion, it's just that wasn't happening because of panic, not just in the U.S. stocks, but other countries that are like, we don't know that we have faith. We're going to sell U.S. treasuries, etc. So I ultimately think that both of these things are true. I think that this was more or less where Trump was hoping to get. His bargaining position, if he was originally here and the world would have been here, now it's closer to here. And so when that negotiation happens, instead of getting a deal right here that would be more favorable to the United States, you're more likely to get a deal here that is less favorable than when you would have gotten. But I do think that there are a lot of people that are right, that it's like Trump's just flying by the seat of his pants, and ultimately he chickened out because things got worse than he thought they would have. I think that that's true, that he pulled the trigger early. Bandit, thanks so much for $2. Says, do I think a depression's inevitable? No, not like Great Depression. I think it would be if we continue with the status quo. It certainly will be. But there are ways to get out of it that maybe just leads to a recession and not a depression. But that's ultimately where I think we're at. Now, what are the pros and cons of the way things shook out? Well, the pros are I think that he has scared the rest of the world, that he's willing to do things that will hurt the United States, at least short term. We saw how many millions of dollars did they say was lost in the stock market? He did it. He knew that it was coming and he still did it. And so they're like, oh shit, he might do this. That's good. That is good from a negotiating tactic because it forces them to deal with trade barriers, imbalances, unfair imbalances that they've had for years. That's good. I think that that's a positive development. And there seems to be a coalition building, if things work out, that will be sort of isolate China, which is also good. Unless China decides to go to war. So that's number two. What's the bad? Huge stock market drop. That's not good. I don't give a shit if you're a populist like me. Screw the rich. Nope, still not good. And there's another downside to this, which is the problem with the American system is that if it worked as it's supposed to and actually represented the will of the people, then it's a very unpredictable system. Because the will of the people is fickle. The majority of people might say, fuck it, tariff the shit out of the EU. And then 2 years later say, nah, we don't want to do that anymore. The way things have been going, for better or worse, we had sort of stability. Since NAFTA and Clinton, we've had sort of, you knew what the trade policies of the United States was going to be. There was slight shifts here and there, but you basically knew. And they were very similar to those of everybody is on board. The globalists were on board in the United States, in Europe, in Canada. Everybody is on board. That's stability. It's stability that hollowed out the American working class, but it's stability. If you actually had a representative government where, like, I don't know, Congress and the president actually represented the will of the people, how does that make you feel as a business investor? So let's say this tariff situation gets figured out. We have deals with the whole world, and Trump doesn't do shit for the next 3 years. He keeps it, whatever these deals are, he keeps it. Okay, we got stability. Now the 2028 elections between Gavin Newsom and J.D. Vance. And J.D. Vance says, I'm going to tariff the shit out of countries. That's what I'm running on. I think Trump was wrong to pull back. And Gavin Newsom says, no, I'm going to remove tariffs that we've already put there. How do you navigate that as a business? By the way, this is why businesses, most of which are more powerful, not most of which, some of which are more powerful than most of the countries of the world, like companies like Microsoft, etc., their net worth. This is why they want one government across the world. They don't want to have to deal with unpredictable shifts and ebbs and flows in government regulations. So there is this, for better or worse, there are benefits to the unpredictable nature of it, which I just said. Just like with foreign policy, there are benefits to our allies and enemies thinking this guy's fucking unhinged. Like, remember Obama's red line in Syria? Everybody knew that didn't mean shit. Everybody knew you basically push as far as you want. With Trump, it's like, we don't know. Hell, his opposition in this country is like, this guy's unhinged. You can't give him the nuclear football. He may nuke someone. General Milley committed treason by going to China and saying, hey, if Trump decides to attack you, I'll tell you beforehand. On one hand, that's treasonous. On the other hand, if you're China, you're like, what the fuck? What? That's how close we are? That Trump could wake up on the wrong side of the bed and be like, yeah, fuck it, war with China. Now, you don't want that. I certainly don't want that. And I don't think that's who Trump is. But if our enemies think that, maybe they're like, you know what? Let's not give him any reason. Let's not antagonize him. On the other hand, that unpredictable nature can lead to people being like, well, do we want to enter into long-term strategic alliances with this country that their leader could just be like, yeah, you know what? Screw it. Ultimately, I think that a shift away from the status quo orthodoxy is best because that status quo orthodoxy, I could see where we're going with the status quo, and that's basically the elimination of national pride, national boundaries, and the middle class. And the world will become the haves and the have-nots. I want to avoid that occurring. So I'm for shifting away from the status quo. But certainly the status quo is benefiting many, many people, particularly in other countries. That's why Europe doesn't like Trump, because Trump's America first. They would rather have a president that's globe first. They don't want a president that's going to say, wait a minute, what's up with all these automobile tariffs in Europe for U.S. car manufacturers? What's up with that? They don't want that. They were happy with USAID giving so much money to the BBC, for example. Why? Why are we funding British state broadcasting? But it's not as simple as it's all good or it's all bad. It's not. So I'm going to do this debate tomorrow night, and this is going to come up. Is Trump's plan a success or not? Well, it depends on who you ask. If you just lost $2 million in the stock market, then his plan sucks. If you just gained $2 million buying the dip, then his plan was awesome. If you're in the steel or coal industry, you're like, great plan. If you're a farmer that sells produce or livestock overseas, probably great. If you're a manufacturer that relies on imports for your product, probably not so great. But ultimately, we won't know for quite some time. And I'm not going to sit here and bullshit you and be like, guaranteed. No, you might say that's weak. Have a prediction, Rob. Shit or get off the pot. What good are you as a commentator if you can't come out here and say, I guarantee that this is what's going to happen? I'm just admitting to you that I'm not an expert. My gut feeling is the tariff strategy, as it was being touted, that I was talking about Monday, wasn't going to work. Primarily because if it was possible for it to work, it was a long-term strategy that was going to take probably 3, 4, if not more years. And the way that our elections go here, there wouldn't be enough people willing to accept that short-term pain for 2 to 4 years to accept it. And so that it would ultimately change and it would be a failure at that point. Bandit says they want the Marshall Plan in perpetuity. Thanks for the $2. I don't disagree. I think that the current negotiating plan, far better chance of success. My gut feeling is if negotiations come about with countries, they will probably be marginally better than the status quo. I don't think it'll be everything that you were promised. I don't think that all of a sudden that all of Nike is going to build their factories in the United States. But I think you will see more manufacturing in the United States. And I think ultimately you will see U.S. businesses doing better because there'll be more favorable negotiations than the status quo. But it won't be this utopia, I think, that everyone was dreaming of. But I can't guarantee that. That's just my gut feeling. I think that's ultimately, I think people economically will be happy with Trump, barring another COVID, a world war, shit like that, or Trump on a whim changing his mind or some shit again. But I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I don't have huge confidence. Other things I have big confidence in. For example, I have really big confidence that no one who actually was involved in some of the most unethical criminal behavior in places like the FBI for the past 8 years will face any sort of real legal consequence. That I'm more positive of. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty positive of that. Why? Because it never happens. But that's ultimately where I'm at. There's a bunch of fucking hypocrites that are worth calling out. You're seeing the left call out a bunch of hypocrites that absolutely deserve it. And those are people that are like, good, the stock market's crashing. I don't give a shit. Yay, good. Screw Wall Street. Which is fine. I think that's a bad opinion, but that's fine if that's your opinion. But to then, when the stock market bounces back up, for the same people that are saying that, saying, see, look, what are you doing? You were pretty stupid and foolish if you were tweeting out the other day when stocks went green for a little bit in the morning. Aha, see? And then they dipped back down, and then all the people on the left were like, aha, see? Pretty foolish. But at the same time, if you're on the other side of the ledger, and you were like, oh, stock market's dipping, this is terrible, blah, 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 Trump's horrible. And then the stocks start coming back up, and you're like, oh, Trump's a coward, blah, 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 blah. Okay, you're being a bit of a hypocrite. Maybe not entirely. But if the stock market ends up higher, you think they're going to say, wow, Trump did a great job. Of course not. And those same people, what were they saying when the stock market was going down under Biden? Well, the stock market's not the real economy. So there's a lot of hypocrites out there on both sides on this issue. I do not, I'll just give you my prediction right now. I do not think that you will see the stock market equal where it was before Trump announced these tariffs for months. So I think if you're expecting tomorrow, the next day, we'll be right back to where we were, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think there was enthusiasm today. You saw a bounce. We might see some of that tomorrow. But my prediction would be by the end of the week, it'll sort of start to set in. Well, wait a minute. We are looking at a trade war with China. And there is this looming issue of we only have 90 days. And, you know, we're not predictable. We don't have a predictable of what's going to happen for sure. So I think that we'll start to see stocks level out and then slightly trend downward. That's my guess. But ultimately, that's my take on this. I think that, you know, the people that are like, you know, I've said that I think some of it is Trump adjusting because the numbers were worse than they anticipated. But also, there was a plan eventually to get to the negotiating table. I think it makes sense why Trump's team wouldn't come out and say that that's the plan. Because they want the people that we're inevitably going to negotiate with to think, wow, we're not starting from a place of, okay, basically this is all hot wind, but Trump will come to the negotiating table before he implements these tariffs because it would harm the U.S. economy. I think now those people might be more likely to think like, oh shit, this isn't hot wind. If we don't come to a deal within 90 days, he's going to do this shit. I think Trump would have liked that pressure to actually go into effect for like a month or two, but he had to pull the trigger early. That's what I think. I think it does make sense. Even if your plan, your long-term plan is we want negotiations, it makes sense for your public image and what you're saying publicly to be like, nah, dog, we don't care. You've screwed us over for years. We don't care. It's too much now. You owe us reparations. That's where we're starting from. So that's my feeling. And, you know, I don't think I've quite heard other people say that. I think people are in camp 1 or 2. This was all 4D chess, or Trump didn't have anything planned and he just is a coward that backed out. I think the truth's somewhere in between those. I think this was in the realm of the things that they were planning, but this wasn't ideal for them. And they did back down because they saw bad things in the markets, particularly the bond markets. That's ultimately what's going on. Now, another thing I want to say, it's one of the biggest days in market history, right? Am I right? Yay, Trump. Right, lefties? That's how this game's played, right? Remember when they locked down the economy? And then they were like, okay, you can go back to work. And they started to count all those as jobs created. Remember that? Remember when presidents on all sides of the aisle, Republican, Democrat, thanks so much, Bandit, for the $2, says no plane survives contact with the enemy. Yeah, I agree. Remember? And then they would say, well, we cut the deficit. You know what that means? You know what cutting the deficit means? Cutting the deficit doesn't mean last year we spent $2 trillion more than our revenue was. And so this year we had a surplus. We got $2 trillion more than we spent. No, cutting the deficit would be last year we spent $2 trillion, but this year we only spent $1 trillion. That would be, well, you just cut the deficit by 50%. Sounds good, right? Sure, you still spent $1 trillion. And one of the things I remember streaming like 3-4 years ago, I talked about this. I was like, well, then wouldn't it behoove you as a president for the first year to run up like a $15 trillion deficit? And then the next year, cuck it back down to like $1 trillion and go, I just dropped the deficit 90%. No president in history has cut the deficit that fast, that rapidly. That's how these games that are played with our politics. Here's another one. I told people for years that the inflation under Biden was so bad that inevitably the numbers would fall just because prices couldn't keep going up 12% year over year. And so inevitably when they fell, it still wouldn't be good. But the Biden administration and the Democrats would be like, we did it. We solved inflation. Look how much we brought inflation down. Which is exactly what they and the Democrats did. I talked about this all the time. I said, imagine this. Let's say, we'll just make the numbers simple because I'm a simple person. I'm not very good at math. Let's say when President Biden got into office in 2021, milk cost $2 a gallon on average. And at the end of that, it was going to cost $10 a gallon. Now you'd say that is incredible. 5 times as much. Now let's say I give you 2 scenarios to how milk got to that level. Scenario 1 is every year it goes up $2. So year 1 it goes from 2 to 4, then from 4 to 6, then from 6 to 8, then from 8 to 10. Every year inflation doubled. Boy, that's bad. 100% inflation every year? Or let's say scenario 2 is year 1 it goes from $2 to $10. And then years 2, 3, and 4 it stays at $10. They would say, wow, 0% inflation for 3 years. That's better than 100% inflation every year. But the problem is, as a consumer, you don't give a shit. And year 5, you're still paying 5 times more than you were 5 years ago for a gallon of milk. It hardly matters to you if that was incremental inflation or if it happened overnight when it comes to your dollars paying for it today. And I remember saying, I was like, I ought to run for governor of Pennsylvania. And then raise the gas tax to like 5,000%. So that for one day, my first day in office, gas costs $40 a gallon. And then the next day, drop it back down to where it was when I came in. And then have my slogan be, no one has ever dropped gas prices as much as me in history. We went from $40 a gallon to $2.50. That's how these politicians look at these numbers. And I said, I don't know how, you go back and you watch my old videos, I talked about this. I was like, when the shoe's on the other foot, wait and see how all of a sudden the Democrats magically know, oh yeah, that's not the way things work. So here we have, okay, stock market loses $9 trillion of value under Trump. Hypothetically, I don't know if those numbers are accurate. I haven't looked into it, but let's say that's true. And then today it gained back $4 trillion. Wow, one of the biggest gains in one day in history. Trump's amazing, right? Yeah, but the 2 days before he lost $9 trillion. That was a long time ago. Who's paying attention to that? He gained us $4 trillion today. Right? That's how the game works. That's how it worked with inflation with the Biden administration, right? That's how it worked with job creation. Tell everyone they can't go to work, and then when we let them go back to work, we say, see, job created. That's how we do it, right? Eggs are $6 a dozen and sold out at my local grocery store. Holy shit. You must be furious at Biden for ordering all those chickens killed. Right? That's all right. We forgive you. Oil prices down, inflation trending down. We'll see how much that continues if there's a rebound in the stock market, but sure. Now, I made a tweet or a post on X, whatever you want to call it, saying basically what the title of my video was. It was like, oh boy, if we said jobs created under Biden was because we let people come back to work and inflation was bested because he had really high 12% inflation and then that dropped to 3%. Oh boy, what a victory. Then I'll say today's one of the biggest days in market history. Thank you, Trump. And of course, half the people on that post, oh, I thought you were good faith, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, they can't see I'm being sarcastic. I'm not really saying, wow, Trump just gained the stock market. I'm saying the stock market bounced back because Trump seemed to go back about what their public statement was. I don't personally think we'll get back to where we were before the tariffs for months, if even then. We'll eventually get back, though. It certainly will happen. But will the long-term benefits outweigh the short-term loss? I hope so. And the way I look at it, the reason that I prefer Trump is because who was the other up now? Maybe DeSantis, maybe Vivek. But who was running as Democrat, whether it be Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, that wasn't just going to be a continuation of status quo economy policies? What was a Kamala presidency? What was it going to do to address the declining wealth of the middle class in the United States, manufacturing fleeing the United States, the increased debt? What were they going to do? They're going to tax billionaires. Okay, even if you took all the money from all the billionaires, that'd fund the government for a year. Then what? What was the plan after that? Also, one of the things that I think sort of correct, that sort of has flipped, I always think this stuff's funny. I always find issues interesting when the two sides, when like the conservative side and the liberal side seem to flip. So like immigration's one of those. Immigration used to be a big left-wing issue, that they were against immigration because they saw it as competing with labor. So if you're the party of the worker, you're the party of the union, you don't want cheap competition coming in for your union jobs. That's why you had union leaders like Cesar Chavez that were like going to the border, beating the shit out of immigrants. That was the Democrat position for years. Bernie Sanders used to talk about this. We needed to secure the border and not bring in all this cheap labor from overseas. Then it flipped. Tariffs are like that. Tariffs, protectionism used to be pro-labor. Now you see conservatives pro-labor and the Democrats are arguing for free markets. Allegedly. But what they're really arguing for is the status quo, which is corrupt corporatism, which isn't a free market. Yeah, Pelosi, Schumer talking about tariffs being important. Bernie talking about tariffs being important. Now they're like, no, it's the worst thing in the world. But I think it's funny listening to these Democrats that are like, well, the problem is the tariffs won't just be on the companies. It's actually a tax on the consumer. Because what happens is these companies, they're not going to eat the cost. They're going to pass it on to the consumer. Now do taxes. How is that not the same rationale for why taxing the wealthy is a dumb idea? They're just going to pass that cost. The businesses that the wealthy own, they're just going to pass it on to the consumers. So, for example, when you see Democrat governors that want to increase taxes on businesses, and the argument that free market conservatives have been making is, but if you do that, for example, in Pennsylvania, you have fracking companies. The Democrat governor's like, we're going to tax the shit out of these fracking companies. The companies aren't going to eat the cost. They're going to pass the cost on. Okay, we'll just raise the price of our product so that we can continue to hit our profit margin. And the Democrats are always like, no. That's trickle-down economics. Trickle down. But with tariffs, they're like, oh, no. No, they'll pass that on to the consumer. This is fundamentally untrue. Philosophy Cat says, stop the cope, Rob. China didn't bow. The U.S. is more reliant on exports to China than the other way around. That's not true. China is far more reliant on exports coming to the United States than the United States is reliant on exports going to China. No one's saying China. Can you show me anywhere? Can anyone show me anywhere in this entire video? I'm an hour and 15 minutes. Can anyone timestamp anywhere where I say China bowed? Can anyone? Did anybody remotely hear me say anything like that? Does anyone recall me saying, this is a victory for Trump? China bowed down. They caved in. Can anyone show me anywhere where I said that? Spoiler alert, I didn't say that. What I was talking about with China was that the United States is trying to isolate China and set them out as the bad actor here and have a worldwide coalition to trade and trade coalition to go against China. That's what I said. I said, we'll see if it works. But I don't remember that me being coping because I said China bowed. Oh, it says tariffs affect poor and middle class more because it's like a 10% to 30% tax increase for the middle class compared to a 1 to 1.2 tax increase for the rich because they spend less of their money. That's true when it comes to tariffs. If you're just evaluating, do tariffs affect? Well, it's not necessarily true. In theory, you're right. Like, how much of the total money that me as a lower middle class person do I spend a year? A higher percentage than a billionaire. So therefore, if everything I buy costs 20% more, then the tariffs affected me more. But if instead of tariffs, you put an income tax on the rich, how would that end up affecting? So we're not just talking about who specifically do tariffs affect more. If we decide to tax the rich like Democrats are suggesting, a progressive tax rate that says, well, the top X percentage of what they make is going to be. Because the way it works, a progressive tax rate works like this. The first $30,000 you make, whether you're a billionaire or you only make $30,000, will be taxed at this rate. And then there's ladders. So if you make more than $1 million a year, it's taxed at this, and then more than that, and more than that, and more than that. Would that end up hurting consumers and labor more? Arguably, yes. If you went with the basically tax the billionaires out of existence plan, because what will happen is the billionaires, once they make like $1 million each year, they'll say, okay, we're no longer interested in making any more money. So we're not going to invest this money anymore. Why would we? If you're just going to tax it at 50%, why fucking bother? I'll just go to other countries and make money, and I'm not going to bother dealing with the United States now. So arguably that hurts the consumer in the middle working class more. I do need a cough drop. That's not a bad observation. The other thing with tariffs is, and again, I've said from the get-go, remember way back when I was on that thread of all those lefties, or on that panel with all those lefties talking about the Destiny allegations, and that non-fawn guy thought he was going to like, oh, fucking tariffs. I was like, yeah, I don't like tariffs. But there's an upside to tariffs. The downside is consumers pay more. The upside, theoretically, is it encourages more manufacturing in the country. Think of NAFTA in reverse. What's the upside of NAFTA? Cheaper products. And it did do that. What was the upside of letting China join the World Trade Organization? Cheaper goods for the American consumer. Certainly true. Absolutely true. What was the downside? Well, the second part of that promise was, we're going to take all these people that work in the middle class manufacturing jobs, and there's going to be all these other jobs created that they'll transition to. And it didn't happen. So now you have people that used to work at steel mills making inflation adjusted 35, 40 bucks an hour that are now working at Walmart making 15, 16 bucks an hour. It hollowed out the manufacturing class, the blue collar worker in this country. Theoretically, tariffs would work in the inverse. Yes, consumers pay more for the products, but it creates more good-paying middle-class jobs. Now, the counter-argument to that position is, yes, but we've transitioned too far for those jobs to come back. You're not going to see a return to manufacturing like you saw in the United States in the 70s. But that's the argument. And again, I say that as someone who ultimately doesn't favor tariffs. I favor tariffs as a negotiating strategy to hopefully encourage. I think that what the three-pronged plan that you need is tariffs as a negotiating strategy, huge removal of tax burdens for businesses and regulations on businesses to make it a more business-friendly environment in our country. I think that's the second part of it. And lastly, you need a massive decrease in government spending. I think that those three things largely would help the middle class in this country. But there's not going to be massive decrease in spending. I totally agree with this, Andrew. Andrew says, Jefferson, a classic libertarian, ran the country on tariffs. They're part of capitalism. They're a correction tool. And the majority of people saying tariffs bad ignored it if he only applies at the start. It doesn't apply to counter tariffs. That's right. So like if you vision the world like you're all starting to play like some game, like you're all playing a game of civilization and we're in the United States and then there's other character players that are playing as Spain and France and China and whatever. The default at the beginning of the game is you could all trade with whoever you want. But once one country erects trade barriers, you no longer have free trade. So the question is, what do you do? Well, if the goal is we want to remove all barriers, one of the tools you could use is all the other countries saying, okay, until you eliminate that barrier, we're going to put a similar barrier on you. And then you hope that that causes them enough pain that they say, okay, we'll remove this barrier. ML says, in that game, you just build nukes fastest. Well, the United States did that too. It doesn't matter if manufacturing jobs are done by robots in modern factories. One, that would still hopefully lead to production of those sorts of robots and the people that are running them being in the United States. Second, that business's money that they're earning is still going into benefiting communities in the United States. And third, it's not as simple as that. It's not as if all the factories is just one guy pushing buttons with hundreds of robots running around. That's not what's going on. Maybe eventually that's where we get. But this was sort of one of the things that was sold about manufacturing being worthless for a long time now. Certainly, the amount of people necessary to run a factory, maybe you only need 50% as many people as you did in the 70s. But it's not just all Jetsons like robots running everything. Furthermore, if it was, then it defeats your own argument. Because the argument for why it's preferable to have a business in, say, China or India other than the United States is, well, because the cheap labor. But if it's going to be cheaper in the long haul to just build robots that are 0% labor or payment, it's just a one-time cost, then you would already prefer to be in the United States. Particularly if we lower the regulatory burden. What country, if you're a business owner, what country would you rather be in? China, where the government could just come nationalize your industry at any fucking point, and you got to deal with a bunch of, like, not the greatest policies and livelihood, or the United States? That's the other thing. A lot of people have this sneering contempt for manufacturing. Well, these jobs are beneath us. You saw Representative Crockett say this the other day. We ain't going back to picking cotton. So what? Have the other countries pick the cotton for you? What are you trying to say? I understand, right, to a lot of people out there that, like, blue collar type work or working with your hands and stuff sounds unbearable. But you understand that everyone I know in my life, or at least 90%, that's how we live. I might not do a traditional blue collar job. I don't. I work in healthcare. But let me just give you a little bit of what my past 2 weeks have been like. I work with multiple people, clients, adults with disabilities, developmental disabilities, right? I'm not going to give any names, any locations, anything like this. We'll just say hypothetically, this is how a couple of weeks could have went for me. I got punched in the face while I was driving a car to the point where the police had to show up. Then I had to watch someone who I've been working with for a long time basically get wrestled down by police in a terrible situation. I watched another person have another interaction in a community that was similar to that, though not as aggressive. I worked at a house with a person who was projectile vomiting for hours, then sat with them in an emergency room lobby for 6 hours while I had to hold a cup while they vomited all over me the entire time. I had my car vomited in as I was transporting people to medical facilities. A smell that I probably won't be able to get out. I had people that I care about deeply that are having more long-term systemic health issues from work that I'm trying to work through. I make roughly $20 an hour. That's what I make. Now, part of that is I fucked around in college and got a stupid degree and drank a lot. But I still love my job. Now, most people that I see pontificating on politics online, most of them are streamers. That's their job, so okay, whatever. Yeah, to those people, I can't imagine that they would want to do a job like I have, where you might get punched in the face and clean up bodily fluids every day and have to deal with the police. Most people wouldn't want to work on a farm. Most people wouldn't want to work on a road construction crew. Wouldn't want to be like a lot of the friends I knew when I used to bartend that did roofing. They were 50 years old with bad knees and bad backs, carrying 50-pound bags of shingles up rickety ladders on tops of roofs all day in the sun all summer. Most people don't want to do that shit. Well, the people I know they're okay doing it. That's okay. That's what they know. Most people don't want to work on the oil rigs. Guess where I'm going this Friday? My friend that works on oil rigs in Texas, his house. He loves it. I understand, though, that way of life to many people just seems like, who would do that? Of all the people I know that live around here, probably 5% of them pay for someone to do the yard work. You know who does the yard work and the house cleaning for everyone here? You, yourself. That's who does it. So when I hear wealthy people say, well, who will do the yard work? Who will pick the crops? Want to know what one of the first jobs I had was? Working on a Christmas tree farm. The same type of job. You know who does that job now? Immigrants. That's who does it now. They don't have 16-year-old kids there in high school doing it for $5 an hour. I guess I was getting $6.15 an hour, if I remember what I was making, to trim, drag, cut Christmas trees. So when you hear all these people say, oh, you brought those jobs, who would give a shit, and blah, blah, blah. Like the contempt that people have for this and the people that live that way of life. Now, is there truth to the argument that there is a lot of people not in the labor force right now that theoretically could do those jobs if they really wanted? Yeah, that's true. Because we've made people too comfortable and given them too many options not doing work. Do you think a lot of those people not in the labor force are starving to death? Or do you think they're getting welfare or disability or other sort of government funds? Start forcing people. Yeah, I've said this for a long time. People on welfare and stuff have job fairs every 2 weeks. They have to show up, do a job fair, get job training, go out to some job. That's what you should be doing. If they don't show up, no check. Well, Rob, they can't do it. They have some sort of disability. Then you show up and you read. You punch a clock like anyone else. You're going to be here at 8 o'clock in the morning. You'll leave at 5 o'clock in the evening. You're going to read quietly, like study hall. See how quick people get jobs when they find out how boring that is. They don't have transportation, whatever, fine. We'll provide you with a camera that you can sit in front of your computer and do it. We'll have people monitoring. I had this friend growing up. He wouldn't go to school. He's younger than me. Just wouldn't go. And his parents were like, we don't know what to do. He just won't go. He will not go. There's nothing we can do. We ground him. And I told him, I'm not going to advocate hitting people or anything like that, hitting kids. I was like, here's what I would do. Because they had jobs. It was a single mother. She had a job. She's like, I don't know what to do. I go to work. He just doesn't go to school. And then who knows what he does all day while I'm at work. I was like, here's what I would do. Take every wire in the house, every TV wire, every video game wire. You take it with you. There is zero entertainment options, period. Do that for a month and then see how quick he's ready to go to school. Because you leave and he has access to a Super Nintendo, a Sega, a computer, a VCR, cable TV. He gets whatever he wants. Toucan Sam, thank you so much. 50 gifted memberships. Wow. That's incredible, man. Thank you so much. Awesome. You guys are the best. I have the best audience. People like you, Toucan Sam. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I am dating myself. Sega, Super Nintendo. Hey, man, we had a Nintendo 64 and PlayStation. My guess is I probably did I have a PS2 by the time I graduated high school? It'd be close. Probably. I know I had a 360 like my fourth year in college, so. I did see that. We're not picking cotton anymore. Yeah, the arrogance that these people have. And look, I understand the economy as it's currently set up. I understand why, if you're a member of like the academic class, if you went and you got a job to become a human resource officer or to become some administrator, why would you want the status quo to change? Everything's looking great for you. You don't give a shit that a bunch of people that do jobs that you think are bad for the country or beneath you are out of work. You don't give a fuck if the coal miner can't work. You don't care if the welder can't find jobs. You don't care if the guy that used to work in the glass factory all of a sudden doesn't have a job. Why do you give a shit? I get that. I don't agree. I agree more with Bessonette than Navarro. One thing I'll say about Navarro, he went to jail to stick up for Trump, so. Cody says, I work in manufacturing. I know people who started running machines and work in departments like sales, production control, CI, etc. Yeah. So I get that. And like anytime an economy changes, even if it's for the overall worse, there will be people that benefit. Holy man, our old friend Crisco donates 50 subs. Thank you so much, Crisco. Incredibly generous. And here's the thing about Crisco. Every single sub that he gives is one less can of fishing bait. And he's an avid fisherman. So that's 50 cans of fishing bait that Crisco just gave up to donate. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, great guy. But you could see this sneering contempt for sort of manual labor that so much of this country has. And the other thing is, look, I'm telling you right now, I'm not of the burn it down, fuck the people that invest in stock market. I don't have stocks. I have a 401k. I'd tell you it's laughable. I don't know how much is in there. I may have adjusted it a year ago to basically be very little, like only 10% of it to be in stocks. I can't remember. I don't know. But that's it. I've never personally invested in a stock or anything like that. If the stock market, if I lost my 401k tomorrow, it would suck, but it would be like, what am I out? $10,000 that will be worth nothing by the time I retire 30, 40 years from now anyways. Nah. But I don't want to see it burn to the ground. I don't. But I get the anger. I get the anger that people have. I get the anger that people in manufacturing jobs have that lost their way of life. Drew the Dogman, thanks so much. Says, I pull all the money out and bet it on horses. There you go. Probably got a better track record with that. Thanks for being a member for 6 months. Appreciate it. If you're young and you feel like nothing I could do will ever lead to me having enough money to buy a house, I get being like, whatever, burn it down. I get that. It is EOD. The Dow Jones, I think, went up the highest that it's ever been in one day. Not percentage wise, but volume wise. I do own my house. Well, the bank owns it. I have a mortgage. I think I got 9 more years to pay on it. Yeah, I could agree. Screw China. Yeah. But, having said all that, like, I still want this country to thrive. I want the wealthy to thrive. I want the poor to thrive. I want the middle class to be robust and healthy. I care most about the working class. That's why, you'll never see me make fun of anyone with a job. I'll see people working at McDonald's or something like that. I'm not gonna make fun of them. That doesn't mean that I'm one of these people like, if you work at McDonald's, you should be paid $40 an hour. I'm not saying that. But I ain't gonna make fun of someone who's actually getting out there and trying to work. Because so many people now just find loopholes to say, I'm not gonna work. I'll get money from the government in some way. That doesn't mean everyone who's doing that is scamming. Some people have legitimate disabilities. It's just, Anybody who's willing to get out there, work fucking sucks, man. It sucks. Most people have jobs that they would rather not be doing on any given day. Not everyone, but most, you think I want to go to work and get vomited on? You think I want to get physically assaulted and shit? No. Having said that, I love my job. There are days I go into work that I absolutely would do for free. Problem is, you don't know which day is going to be which. And to be quite frank with you, even though I like my job, I like my family more. And if it was up to me, I would spend damn near every day with my family. Today, my 4-year-old son, it's so stupid. It's so fucking dumb. Sorry, I told myself to stop swearing as much. It's so ridiculously dumb. We'll go with that. It's going to sound so stupid to you all. He's starting to get into shows that are a little less babyish, right? So we ain't doing Coco Melon anymore. So we could do like Spidey and Friends, which is definitely geared towards like young kids. But then we could also sometimes watch like the Avengers cartoon, which is geared to be a little more maybe teenage. A lot of times we ain't doing that stuff. But one of the shows he's got into, I don't know if you ever heard of this. I never watched it, but I was aware of his existence. Is called Ben 10. Have you guys ever seen Ben 10, or do you know anything about Ben 10? And it's definitely a cartoon that's not geared to like 4-year-olds. It's probably geared to more like 9, 10-year-olds. But it's a little more watchable as an adult. It's sort of like the classic comic book. It's a kid who gets a device and he can turn into like 10 different aliens, but they all have like powers. So like he's basically 10 superheroes in one. So the one alien's like super strong and has 4 arms. And then the next, he could shoot fire. He's made out of fire and can shoot fire, right? And it's I was vaguely aware of the show, but I didn't know anything about it. So he saw some videos on YouTube or something and was like talking about it. And so it's on Netflix. So we put it on and he sat in my lap for like an hour today. And that's cool enough. I love when my son takes an interest and like hang out. But what was cool was it's one of the first times where he could teach me stuff. So it's like, that's Heat Wave. That's that guy's name. That's that alien. His powers are he could shoot fireballs. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then in the episode, like a big fire breaks out and he's like, but the fire won't hurt him. He could walk through the fire. And it was one of the greatest moments of my life, sitting there with my son and my son feeling like I'm teaching dad something. I'm telling him stuff he doesn't know about. That's what I would do every day. That's what I would. If I had Elon Musk money, I'm sorry. I love this country. I'd probably do stuff to help out my community, my country. But the majority of my days would be that. Yeah, my job, what I always say about my job in home healthcare, there's a huge number of people that wouldn't do it. Can you get punched in the face and not retaliate? Can you get punched in the face and then 2 days later be at work and basically pretend it didn't happen? A lot of people say no, and I can't blame you. Can you clean up every kind of gross bodily fluid imaginable? Can you be in a situation in the community where all of a sudden there's an episode that occurs and you have to be in the middle of a crowded mall trying to calm someone down? A lot of people say no, and I don't blame them. Can you listen to the same question be told to you 4,000 times a day? What time is it? Do you like pizza? Do you like fishing? Do you like Batman? Can you hear that question 4,000 times a day and not be a prick about it? A lot of people say no. But there's a lot of the job I really like. For me, it was the first job that I had where I felt like I was, at least if it was just for one person, I was making a difference. And like the jobs I had before that, trimming Christmas trees, working fast food. I worked at a Goodwill donation center. I worked as a bartender. I worked as a debate coach. None of those jobs were ever like, I worked on a hobby farm. I didn't feel like I was really doing anything to contribute to society that much. I didn't think any of it was detrimental, but I guess I could have said I trimmed a Christmas tree that went in some kid's house and they were very happy. But as a direct, like you could really see how you're making a difference in someone's life and helping the community. That's what home health care with people with disabilities did for me. And so all that outweighed the bad parts of the job for me, but it's not for everyone. And so not all jobs are for everyone. I get that. Some people are doing stuff, but I always say my job, I'm like, if you could make it past that initial barrier and you're like, I like this job, the story is the same. For everyone who makes it past that initial barrier, the story is the same for 95% of people I work with. It goes something like this. I love the clients that I work with, but I can't stand the company. Or I can't stand my boss, or I can't stand my coworker. That's where the problems come in. How many people have jobs that theoretically they like? You're a computer coder. You're doing something with code, but you work at a corporation that you can't fucking stand. I mean, if you're a person out there and you have a job, maybe you have your own business, maybe you are fortunate enough to work in a job where you actually love the job. You're very fortunate. You really are. Because most people, when they wake up, they're not going to that. If they had their druthers, they wouldn't be going into the job that day. So, this sort of contempt that comes through for people that do certain kinds of blue collar work and stuff, for me, it angers me because those are the people I love most in life. Those are the people I live around. Those are the people I see every day. I'm not saying I don't like people that are professors. I have plenty of friends that are professors or work in the academic field. I do. But for me, the people I resonate the most with are the blue collar workers, like my dad's been his whole life. My wife's dad's a cop. My wife's stepdad's a truck driver. He grew up as a pig farmer. Her brother works for the gas company. Her other brother, her two stepbrothers, one's a truck driver, one builds trucks. My brothers both did home health care. My sister works at a pharmacy. She's going to college. Right? My neighbor, he goes to hospitals and fills up oxygen tanks. He's an Afghan vet. His wife is a janitor at the local university. Right? Those are the people I know. And so it infuriates me that I look at all of these communities where I live, and I'm telling you, one of these days, what I would love to do is just go around and talk to people and just take my phone and just do live streams showing you my community, hollowed out businesses that don't exist anymore. It's sad. It really is. And no one gives a shit. No one. At least Trump's saying that he does. And maybe you say, but Trump's a liar. He's a billionaire. He doesn't give a shit. Maybe. But at least I don't know how many times I've told this story. That's why people in my area would crawl over broken glass to vote for Donald Trump, because he is the first national level politician that's ever even spoke to these people. He's the first person that resonated, and he's a Manhattanite billionaire. The people that hate Trump will say he's a con man, he's a liar, he's bullshitting these people. The people that love Trump say, no, he really does care about the working class. But I can tell you one thing, these people believe he cares. And they did not believe that about Jeb Bush. And they did not believe that about W. Bush. And they didn't believe it about Barack Obama. And they didn't believe it about Joe Biden. And I'm assuming they didn't believe it about Bill Clinton or H.W. Bush. Maybe Reagan. You want to know you want to know who the most common person voted for around here was? We don't vote. We don't give a shit. One politician's the same as the next. And again, if you don't like Trump, you might say same shit, right? He's just a better liar. Maybe. But people are believing him. The bar is so low that just talking to people and them believing, wow, this guy gives a shit about us. Where was Trump shot? Butler, Pennsylvania. About 45 minutes from where I'm at right now. We go there every year for the fair, the county fair in Butler. I've been to that location where he shot many times. Go up there to see the old demolition derby. Go walk through the livestock. Get yourself a poor man's caramel apple or Denny and Pearl Stromboli funnel cake. So when you see people like, yeah, fuck the stock market, they're coming from a place of like, this guy gives a shit about us. And he's saying, hey, you rich people that invest in stocks. Because people around here, they don't know nothing about investing in stocks. And they, rightly or wrongly, I would say wrongly, they assume everyone who's in the stocks, that only affects the wealthy. Fuck those people. Sorry. I'm going to stop swearing as much. That's how they look at it, though. To heck with them. The other thing is, how many people do you hear out there right now talking about the stock market, this and that? How many of them were for lockdowns? You just shut your mouth. If you were for lockdowns and you have anything ever again to say about the economy, I don't care what your opinion is. I'm not saying that you can't be correct on what you say now. I just don't care what you think at all. I don't want to hear it from you. It'd be the equivalent of someone, Bill Cosby, giving a PSA about not sexually assaulting women. Yeah, that's a good message. I agree. I don't want to hear it from Bill Cosby. Yeah, the people I know are pretty poor. So let me check this real quick. I checked this before. The median household income in my county is $54,000. That's an average of 2 incomes per house. So that would mean 2 people making $27,000 a year. That's the US average for household income is uh 80 something thousand, it looks like. $80,610 as of 2023. So we're about what? 70 to, or we're 30 to 40% lower than the average household income. So it's a pretty poor area. But I don't care about the people that have anything to say about the economy now that we're for lockdowns. Yeah, Trump, the stock market went down under lockdowns and they went down under Trump, but Trump's reasons are stupid and lockdowns we had to do because of COVID. No, we didn't have to do them. In fact, people like me were saying what a mistake it was as it was occurring. So we didn't have to. That's number one. Number two, at least Trump's doing it from a perspective of trying to help the middle class in the United States. The lockdowns had no potential to help the economy. None. At least with Trump's plan, you could say there's a path for how it could. A bunch of countries could agree to drop their tariffs and trade barriers. Businesses could move back to the United States. Jobs could be created in the United States. But Itchy, the thing is, even if 62% of people own stocks, I own stocks. I couldn't tell you what they are. So people might own $2,000-$3,000 worth of stocks. A 20% hit to the market lowers them roughly 20% of that. The vast bulk of the stocks that are owned by the top 10%. So, for example, if inflation goes up 10%, that'll harm me far more financially in 1 year than if I lost every dollar in my 401k in the stock. Well, I don't know about that. But around there, you get the idea. Because I have no idea what my 401k is. My guess it's probably around $20,000. And I don't know how much of that's invested in the stock market. But I'm a stock owner because I have a 401k. And Itchy says, you're saying, are you talking to me? You're saying screw half the country? Where have I said that? Where did I say that? Did I see that Destiny called for Secret Service to do their duty to Trump? Nah, Destiny's unhinged. Should he be investigated? I don't know. I don't take a stance on it. He's unhinged. He blocked me because he gets blown out in debates. He's unhinged. He's everything that he claims to hate. Same thing with tariffs. No, if everything was 30% more effective, it would affect more Americans than cutting income tax for them. Yes, probably would. But would a 30% tariff increase proportionally the cost of everything by 30%? Probably not. Some of that cost will be eaten by the manufacturer, some will be eaten by the home country. So let's say you're still left with 20%. Okay, well, if you get businesses to be created in the United States that would completely avoid that tariff, then you could expect those jobs to be created to buttress people into the middle class. So those people would benefit. They personally get those jobs. And then the products that were created here would be less than 30% more expensive. Speaking of that with Destiny, new polling shows that over 50% of Democrats think that Trump should be assassinated. Let me see if I get the wording of this poll. Let's see. I think I bookmarked this. No, of course I didn't. So we'll read this. Survey: 55% of self-identified leftists say killing Trump is justifiable. The more troubling trend is the rising violent rhetoric isn't just coming from the fringe left, it's being normalized by the left. The unhinged left, fueled by TDS and soothing hatred for Elon Musk, is trending more violent, according to a new study that finds political violence targeting President Donald Trump and his billionaire advisor is becoming increasingly normalized. The report, produced by the Network of Contagion Research Institute, the NCRI, in partnership with Rutgers, finds a broader assassination culture appears to be emerging within segments of the U.S. public on the extreme left, with expanding targets now including figures such as Trump. Less than a year after assassination attempts on then presidential candidate, the literally explosive violence against Musk's Tesla vehicles, it's no secret that leftists are ratcheting up violent rhetoric and actions. The more troubling trend is that assassination culture isn't just the fringe left. These attitudes are not fringe. They reflect an emergent assassination culture grounded on the far left authoritarianism and increasingly normalized in digital discourse, states the report titled Assassination Culture: How Burning Teslas and Killing Billionaires Became a Meme Aesthetic for Political Violence. NCRI, an independent institution working to identify and forecast emerging threats in the era of information disorder, finds the pattern is building on a broader trend discussed in two reports in December that analyzed how viral social media narratives were legitimizing political violence, particularly in the aftermath of the United Healthcare CEO assassination, which we talked about on here. The reports found widespread justification for lethal violence, including assassination among younger, highly online and ideological left-aligned users. They note the spillover effect beyond the online world, illustrated by a proposed California ballot measure macabrely named the Luigi Mangione Access to Healthcare Act, celebrating the alleged leftist terrorist and murderer of the United Healthcare and head Brian Thompson. The ballot measure targets health insurance denials, one of Mangione's flashpoints. On Friday, a California man reportedly angry with pharmacies was arrested on charges of murdering a Walgreens employee just days after Luigi Mangione Act was filed in the state. ABC 30 reported that Eric Velasquez, I guess, the victim, was not a pharmacist and was a respected husband and father of two. NCRI assessed the violent zeitgeist with the original survey data and open source intelligence analysts to determine how normalized justified violence was in the administration and public discourse. Here's some of the findings. Murder justification. 31% to 38% of all respondents stated it would be at least somewhat justified to murder Elon Musk and President Trump, respectively. So 38 of all respondents said it would be somewhat justified to murder Trump. These effects were largely driven by respondents as self-identified as left of center, with 48% of people that identified as left justifying murdering Musk and 55 Trump. Nearly 40% of all respondents stated it's somewhat acceptable or more to destroy a Tesla dealership. Ironically, that's almost the same percent that said it would be acceptable to kill Trump. Psychological correlations with assassination culture. These beliefs are highly correlated with one another, as well as the justification of the murder of the United Healthcare CEO and hyperpartisan left-wing ideology. This suggests the support for violence is part of a broader assassination culture underpinned by psychological and ideological factors. Interestingly, the report finds liberal social media platform Blue Sky, quote, plays a significant and predictive role in amplifying radical ideation. Blue Sky has been seen in new user numbers since November's election, according to leftist publication The Guardian. Curiously, the great exodus has been driven by liberals seeking to escape Elon Musk's X amid warnings from anti-hate speech campaign groups about at the EU and misinformation and extremism on the platform. Now, where I will differ, do I think that we should go after platforms like Blue Sky? Should the EU be fining them $1 billion if they don't censor what the EU wants censored like they're trying to X? No. Do I think that Trump's administration should be putting pressure on Blue Sky to censor left-wingers that disagree with the Trump administration? No. But ironically, the people fleeing Blue Sky from X are doing so because they think that hate speech is radicalizing people on X. And it's actually the left that's becoming more and more radical. Do I worry about people like Destiny engaging in some form of terrorism or assassination attempt? No, he's a fucking coward. He won't do it. He'll gaslight his audience to do it and then be like, well, I was just speaking. That's how all these big shit talkers are. Sorry, again, I shouldn't be swearing. They're too cowardly to do it themselves. They're all crazy. Like, Pisco's, he's not as bad as Destiny. He's not like coding for violence or anything like that. But he's a fascist or criminals, blah, blah, blah. Didn't have shit all to say about. We just had reports breaking. Did you know the Biden administration broke the law by not releasing a report that legally they had to? That came out in his administration, in the early time of his administration, showing that several U.S. service members contracted COVID before we even were talking about the time frame of it at the Wuhan Games or whatever that they were putting on. But because that would have hurt the narrative that this actually came from a lab in Wuhan, they didn't release those findings, even though they legally were supposed to. But don't worry about the fact that, Biden's son worked for the self-professed spy chief of China. Don't worry about that. But in general, not just Destiny, but in general, you'll remember after the assassination attempt in Butler, the first one against Trump, I was not having a good time streaming. I am the type of person that I have many friends that are on the left. I have many friends that hate Donald Trump. I have many friends that hate my politics. It's okay. I can compartmentalize it. No problem. Right? I sort of have this mentality that when I'm debating people, I could go hard, screw you, F you, blah, 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 blah. But it's like part of the game. It's like playing a game of pickup basketball and you're going hard. Same idea. I believe what I'm saying, but it doesn't mean I hate you. For me, arguing is something I've always liked doing. It's not a dirty word. I like arguing. I like people that argue against me and disagree with me, and that's all good. But there's part of me that wants to assume that all the people I'm talking to, even if they're bad faith, even if they would never admit where they're wrong or anything like that, like they don't want to kill me. They don't want to kill the politicians that I support. They don't want to lock me up for my political opinions. They don't want me censored off social media. And increasingly, it seems like that was my mistake to assume that. That's why I said after the assassination attempt, I was trying to give Destiny and others the benefit of the doubt. And I was like, look, we need to come together as sort of people that string politics on the online community and set some ground rules. Like assassinations are a no-go, right? No, if we can't start with that, then there's no discussion necessary. If part of the condition of me and you talking is, well, if I don't like you or the politician that you support, we could kill you, then I don't want to talk to you. And kudos to people like Wick and Pisco that were like called out, like some of like the unhinged, like, yeah, you can't be calling for assassinations. But that didn't start Pisco from entering into a business relationship with Destiny. Did it? Didn't at all, did it? For me, even before it was Destiny, it was Vaush was sort of the first big person that I'd interacted with. Remember when Vaush had that video that said he dreams of a world where people were taking pot shots out the window at Patriot Prayer people? That was after a Patriot Prayer person was murdered by a member of Antifa. That's the world Vaush wants. Why? Because there's a trans genocide. Wouldn't we have stopped Hitler before he came to power and committed genocide? That's the rhetoric Vaush is using. Meanwhile, he'll accuse Tucker Carlson, anyone of the right, of stochastic terrorism anytime a right winger commits an act of violence. It's their fault. I remember when Parler was kicked off the Apple Store. One of the fastest growing social media apps was kicked off the Apple Store because supposedly one of these alleged killers had a Parler account. Is Blue Sky going to be banned? If we find out that the next would-be assassin came from Blue Sky? They can ban it from the Apple Store? Is there going to be an ad boycott by all companies? Nah, that's different. You see, stochastic terrorism only goes one way. How many years have I talked about this? Congressman Gifford gets shot. We don't have to guess the motivation. We could see it because there are YouTube videos of the guy that was the shooter that he was putting up on YouTube before that. He was out of his mind. It wasn't political. He was angry at the university. And so he just decided, here's an event where there's going to be cameras. I'm going to go shoot people up at this university. He ends up shooting Congressman Gifford. But what was the Democrat narrative? Well, it was because she was a Democrat. It must be a Republican that did it. Bernie Sanders put out a fundraiser. Is it even safe to walk in the streets of Arizona as a Democrat? I am asking you once again. You know, my Bernie impression gets worse every day. He fundraised off it. Right-wing language, it's out of control because Sarah Palin put up an ad targeting the district with a bullseye. Now, the ad clearly, or the pamphlet was, we need to target this area to win. But the Democrats ran with that. That was a call for violence. Then, remember when a Bernie supporter shot Steve Scalise and Republicans at a ball field because he was believing Bernie Sanders' rhetoric about repealing Obamacare? Did Bernie say, is it even safe to be a Republican playing baseball with my supporters out there? No, he didn't. Bernie said, we all must tone down the rhetoric. Nancy Pelosi was asked, what do you say to people that blame your rhetoric? How dare you, she said. How dare you? Trump said fight like hell. People like Destiny said that was a call for violence, which meant that he should be kept off the ballot and was ineligible to run for president. They say things like Chuck Schumer reaps the whirlwind. Then there's an attempted assassination attempt on, or Brett Kavanaugh reaped the whirlwind. Then there's an attempted assassination attempt on Kavanaugh. No one says, okay, you can't run for office then. That was a call to violence. Nope. They don't get in trouble for that. Just a little, whoa, maybe we should watch our language a little more. People like Destiny will say Trump saying fight like hell was a call to violence. Meanwhile, he'll say the worst thing that could happen to Trump was that bullet not killing him. If you're a Trump supporter, you're effing around and finding out. If you get shot and murdered, that's not calls to violence for him, though. That's yuck, yuck. Oh, I'm just joking. Haha, just joking. They have no standards. Their standard is power. That's it. Hell, you remember Destiny, the first time I ever interacted with him was like day 4 into the George Floyd riots. What did he say? Which he then later denied saying, which we have the video proof that he did say. He said, rioting and voting are two sides of the same coin. That's what he said. Now, to his credit, he said he was not for riots against private property. But if you feel that you're being screwed over by the government and you attack a government building, well, then go listen to his rhetoric on January 6th. Which didn't attack any private buildings. Violence against Luigi Mangione, he was on the correct side of that Luigi Mangione for killing this healthcare CEO is bad. But when it comes to targeting Trump, that's different. He thinks that it's okay to kill the people that he dislikes politically, and it would be anathema to suggest the same for the people or the people that he dislikes it's okay to kill. But you're a subhuman monster if you would suggest it about the people he likes. That's who these people are. I told you, after Destiny's comments after the first assassination attempt at Trump, someone sent me screenshots of his Reddit. There are people on his Reddit that are saying things like this. Well, here's the thing. We tried to correctly remove Trump from the ballot. We tried to lock him up, but we went through the legal process and the corrupt Supreme Court basically said that Trump is a God king. And so now we can't do anything. He's been given immunity from the Supreme Court. So now we have to do other tactics. There's our resident moron HN. Rob, the market's still down now than it was before Trump was in office. How's this worth celebrating? Go back and watch the stream. Now we find out the second attempted assassin of Trump, Ryan Routh, He was in communications with someone in Ukraine because he regularly got people to volunteer for Ukraine. He was trying to purchase Stinger missiles to shoot down Trump's plane. Now, we'll see if the Ukrainian government knew about that or not. Hopefully, we'll see. But wouldn't that be something if the Ukrainian government knew that there was an American that was trying to assassinate Trump and didn't tell anyone? Remember, though, that guy was a Republican. That was the narrative of the left side. He's just a Republican. Now, I remember when you were censured on social media for saying, I have questions about the 2020 election. Why? Well, because that caused violence on January 6th. Okay, similarly, then because this pro-Ukrainian guy tried to assassinate Trump, and that's causing an attempted assassination of the guy running for president and now the president, should we censor everyone who's pro-Ukraine online? Isn't that how it works? That's the precedent that these social media companies set that were pressured by government entities. That was the precedent that was set, right? We couldn't talk about the virus coming from Wuhan, because that led to racism against Asians and was misinformation that could somehow jeopardize people, so we just weren't allowed to talk about it. How do you think lefties would react if all of a sudden Facebook and X and Instagram was like, yeah, you know what? You can't talk about being pro-Ukraine anymore because it led to an assassination attempt. I think that would fly. Oh, okay. Jay Buck, thanks so much for the $5. Says, cheers, mate. Interesting thoughts. Thank you. I would never suggest. I'm not even suggesting Destiny should go to jail or anything like that, or should be investigated. I'm not saying any of that. I don't want him censored. I don't want any of these lefties censored. But that's what they wanted of us. And it worked. Captain Phoenix says, my 30-day January 6th Facebook ban prevented me from taking out or adjusting the ads I had for my business account because it was an IP level ban. Yep, plenty of stories like that. I've told stories how it affected me. Hell, I got a 30-day ban on Twitch because a lefty pretending to be a righty named Connor did a debate with me where he called me a homophobic slur like 7 times, which resulted in him getting a 7-day ban and me getting a 31. I got community guideline strikes all the time on YouTube. I can't tell you how many times I've had strikes on TikTok. Yeah, Connor was not very good on Tim Pool. Fabian's a tough debate opponent for him. This Friday, Wick is debating Lactoid, which ought to be good. Connor Connor fought for this country. Please show him more respect. No. Pete Hegseth fought for this country. Are you telling Democrats to give him more respect? Can you show me your posts that have suggested as much, HN? Can you show me? You seem to be pretty active on social media. Can you show me one post that you've made criticizing Democrats for not giving Pete Hegseth respect? Heck, I bet if I had all your social media accounts, I'll bet that you yourself have shown a lack of respect to Pete Hegseth. HN says, it's crazy how you're so willing to throw away your friendship with Connor over nothing. What friendship? What friendship did I have with Connor? What am I throwing away exactly? Correctly calling out that he's a grifter? You say wrong. I never disrespected Hegseth. Okay, sure, fine, great. We'll take your word for it. Can you show me your post where you criticize Democrats for not paying enough respect to him? Can you show me that? Show me one. Say, yeah, here. Surely you have many of them. I'm just a small time streamer with 200 people watching. Democrats have been attacking Hegseth since he was nominated. So surely you found the time to be like, wow, Democrats, this man honorably served our country. How dare you? Treat him with respect. Just show me one post. It'll shut me right up. JD Vance? Right, good point. Can you show me it about Vance? Just admit, HN just saying, no, I never did that, so that we could all see. There you go. HN says, I never noticed Democrats disrespecting JD Vance or Hegseth. Do you hear that, everyone? HN, you could not be like, sometimes you're so bad at being a lefty that I wonder if you're not just a right-wing plant that's trolling being a lefty just so I have material. Yeah, they routinely mocked JD Vance during the campaign, saying that he had intercourse with a couch. You missed all that? It's I like, even if he is trolling, I like responding to him. It creates content. Some couches, I like my new couch. I'm not willing to enter into a relationship with it, but I'll take the occasional nap. Okay, you say you never saw them disrespect Hegseth. Okay, you saw them respect JD Vance then. That's a tacit acknowledgement that you saw them disrespect Vance. Can you show me one post that you've made? Because clearly now you're tacitly admitted. Okay, I'm not saying Vance. I just said I didn't see them disrespecting Hegseth. One, I don't believe that. But second, if I do pretend to believe it, well, you're admitting that you saw them disrespecting Vance. Can you show me one post where you said, whoa, Democrats, how dare you disrespect this man? Just one. Just admit, no, I never did. And then if you really want to be honest, it's because I'm a shill, because I don't really believe in the things that I say to you, because I'm holding you to a different standard that I hold the Democrats, because I am a Democrat. And much like most Democrats, I believe that power is the only important thing. And so the standards shouldn't be the same for me as they should be for you. For me, I'm a morally righteous person, so I don't have to be held to standards because the ends always justify the means. But for you, you need to be held to a standard. Just admit that. We know that's the case. No, I can't show you any posts because I don't have social media besides YouTube or Kick. Yeah, you're full of it. Yes, they constantly call Hegseth a drunk and Captain Phoenix says that's Lily Vaush's argument. Right. I know what the game's played. We're good people, they're bad people. We could lie, they can't. We could have free speech, they can't. They need to be held to a standard. We don't have to hold ourselves to that standard. They called Hegseth's sobriety into question just because they wanted to see if he was qualified, not the same thing. Okay, then how is me saying that Connor is not really a conservative? I can't say that because that's disrespectful because he served. How is that not the same argument? Okay, well then you can't question Hegseth's sobriety because he served. Or is what you're telling me, just because someone served doesn't mean that you can't levy criticisms against them? I agree. Thank you for playing. Show me once ever disparaging Connor's military service, even as he and his wife repeatedly said that I engage in oral sex with men. Show me once where I ever disparaged his service. One time. Show me once. On a live stream, when I was streaming with him, when I wasn't streaming with him, any social media post I've made. Didn't happen. I even said in the aftermath of the video I did with him where he waited to talk about his service until the end and then bitch quit because he's so comfortable that he had a mic drop moment that I could say, I served this country and you didn't, and then leave real quick. What's the first thing I said after that? I'm not going to disparage his service. I'm glad he served. And I don't care that you showed him a comment you made in his channel to stop attacking you. Why do I give a shit? I don't care. I'm not going to not attack Connor because he served. So I'll say, oh, he's getting paid by Progressive Victory while he's out there calling himself a conservative. Fair enough, he served, so I can't say anything negative about that. It doesn't show you're morally consistent. Moral consistent would be if you say you can't disparage people that served, applying that moral consistency to anyone who disparages anyone who served. You don't do that. You quite clearly said you make exceptions for people like J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth. Okay. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I did say was like, well, if I bring someone on that served in a more dangerous situation to Connor, based on Connor's logic, does that mean that Connor has to shut up then and accept what they said? So if it turns out that Connor didn't see active combat, for example, but John Burke did, and if John Burke's like, no, Connor, I disagree with you. I think you're a grifting lefty. Then what? Does Connor just say, yes, sir, thank you for serving more admirably than me? I don't care that Pete Hegseth was running for a public position. Connor is publicly taking money from groups that are pushing for public office officials. He's a public streamer. I personally don't care. If you signed up for the service and you did a paper job, I don't care. You did more than I did. I'm not going to disparage that. Tulsi served. Hillary called her a Russian asset. Right. Can you show me your post criticizing that? Plenty of Democrats criticized Tulsi Gabbard. Show me any of your posts. Anyways, done dealing with this. Circular, doesn't matter. But you can see the lefties are becoming more and more unhinged. And I hate to say it, it's morbid. But what are the chances that there's an attempt on Elon Musk or Donald Trump's life in the next 4 years? Pretty high. And then what? It'll be an all, oh, we weren't serious. We'll say people like Destiny, we weren't serious about it, but well, now we could get on to maybe getting a better leader. Both extremes are unhinged. Not just both, all extremes are unhinged. In fact, all not extremes are unhinged. Who do you think's the most milquetoast politician? I could probably find you someone who's a fan of them that's unhinged. But if you can't see the disparity in what is normalized by both sides, 30% of Democrats, I think it was 28%, according to a YouGov poll in like 2022 or 2023, said that parents that weren't vaccinated should have their children taken from their homes when it came to the virus. 50% said you should be put in a detainment facility if you weren't vaccinated. Now we have posts saying, what was the number again? 55% said that killing Trump would be justified. 55% of people that identify as left. Tesla dealerships being bombed, pro-life centers being bombed or fire attacked, Tesla's being mass vandalized, lefties rioting over and over and over before the inauguration of Trump in 2016, all through the summer of love 2020. And you get the big brain takes. Actually, both sides do it. Both sides. It's actually both sides. Meanwhile, one side, when they engage in an act of violence like January 6th, we have the largest FBI manhunt in history. The other side, everybody's basically given a slap on the wrist and there's no big investigations. One side gets mass censored online. The other side, it would be anathema to suggest that they have any sort of censorship whatsoever. Destiny could publicly go on YouTube and other platforms and say the things he said about Trump. Trump supporters are F around, find out if they get shot and murdered. He thinks the worst thing that could happen was the bullet not hitting Trump. All the other things, I don't watch him anymore, that people are saying that he's doing, pointing to guns, suggesting the Secret Service should take Trump out, etc., etc., etc. Meanwhile, 55% of people on the left could say, yes, we think it would be justifiable for Trump to be murdered. There ain't no chance he's getting censored, is there? But if I would say anything remotely similar to that about Nancy Pelosi, my channel would be done in a heartbeat. And what's O's big take? Both sides do it. Both sides do it. So, both sides do it. Oh, okay, fair enough. Well, I guess nothing to talk about here then. It is mainstreamed on the left for these sorts of comments. Do I think the Wisconsin Supreme Court election is a good measurement for how the midterms will go? No, I think it's a potential warning, but it's an off-year election, which Republicans always do worse at. And furthermore, the incumbent party that just won always does worse at because the other side's more fired up because their side lost. It's Wisconsin. But it could. I don't think it suggests anything nationally. Yeah, it serves as a warning, though, because it is true. Like, Republicans getting up for an election with Trump on the ballot, Republicans getting up for a mid-year election, or midterm, Republicans getting up for an off-year election. So the midterms will have less enthusiasm than the Trump years, but it won't be as little as an off year. So the right was crying about the election being rigged for 4 years until Trump won again. And so what's that have anything to do with anything we were talking about? I just went through a laundry list of violence on the left versus violence on the right. And you're like, well, yeah, well, Republicans were mad about the election for 4 years and said it was rigged. Okay. And what does that have to do with anything? I like the moving of the goalposts and the changing of the conversation there, but yeah, not going to work with me. Alrighty. So tomorrow evening around 8 p.m., I have a debate on Jake Rattlesnake's channel. It'll be on, have Trump's first few months been good or bad? All I know is the person I'm debating is named Adam, and he's debated on Jake's channel before. I'll probably start streaming before 8, maybe 7:30, 7:45 p.m. Eastern time. So it should be fun. And then Friday, I'll be doing a morning stream. It'll probably be a call-in sharing, maybe at like 8 or 9 in the morning. No, it won't be a call-in on Thursday. It'll be a debate. Friday will be a call-in, probably 8 a.m. or 9 a.m., all times Eastern. That's sort of the plan. So you can call in, debate, and you can talk about January 6th. HN had a good time calling in last time. the don't go so well when you call in. This is the first I've really thought about politics all week because crazy situation going on at my job. So I'm going to be busy all day tomorrow. I'm going to enter this debate with like no preparation. It's not an excuse. I hope though that this Adam guy just absolutely destroys me. I really do. That's what I need to have happen. Because the first time I get smacked around in a debate really bad, I'm going to be like, I got to start taking these more seriously and got to start putting preparation into it. Until then, I'm just going to be like, okay, sure, debate, let's do it. So, that'll be that. So I'm gonna go downstairs now and see if I can watch some more Ben 10 with my son. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Thank you so much to everyone that donated. Special thanks to Crisco and Toucan Max, who both donated 50 memberships. It's incredibly generous. Your money is going back into the channel. I know that like it's hard to see right now. I will say this isn't I have no intentions to leave my job or anything like that. But I will say I am thoroughly at the point where it is a backup plan of mine if anything would happen with my job to try to put in for at least 3-4 months a full-time effort streaming with some of the money I've saved up. Um, and I would certainly be amenable to streaming full-time if I made enough money to do it. Um, but obviously, providing for my family comes first. Money streaming is not as consistent as money working a full-time job. Uh yeah, Jack, we have that we have a little tablet for Hank and we have that Cartoon Network, the kid-friendly game. PBS has some good ones too. So Jantix gives $10 to the body fluid funds. Yeah, I dealt with a lot this week. Um I am not close to full-time streaming. I would need to make $100,000 a year to full-time stream to make up the insurance that I have at work and the salary that I make at work. So Black Jaden though becomes a member, says we'll get you there. Thank you so much. 5 months membership. Thank you. Really appreciate it. So look, there's too many people I know in my life that have quit their job to do their passion and then ended up not being able to provide for their family. Most of them were in bands. They were talented, but going around to bars playing for almost no money while you got mouths to feed at home isn't a good idea. And neither's jumping in with both feet to the stream community. You know, even if I make a ton of money, here's the deal. Who's to say YouTube doesn't demonetize me like in one day? Then what? So, you know, we are, I'm in some talks. I got some small connections that's talking to some people. I don't want to give anything up, but, there's some things on the horizon that'll hopefully pan out to some level. Ultimately, my goal is not just for me, but for other conservative streamers that I would like to see some people with some financial backing hire someone or hire people, um, like you would see on a conservative radio network, pay people a salary, even if it's month to month, so that there's more guaranteed money so we could get more content creators that are right wing reaching out to younger audiences that are places online. I think there needs to be an attempt to merge that older talk radio audience with sort of a new modern online audience. And it's hard because of the way social media is set up for algorithms to be favorable and for monetization to be favorable for conservative streamers. You're always taking a chance if you decide that this is going to be your career. But that puts us on a back foot with the streamers that are left wing that do this full time as a career. I think I'm a pretty good debater. Can you imagine how good I would be if I was doing this 8 hours a day? If I was streaming 4 hours a day and doing 4 hours a day of reading and research? You know how good I'd be? As opposed to dealing with police and cleaning up bodily fluids all day at work and then coming home and eating dinner with my family and then immediately coming upstairs. Well, Daily Wire was part of that sort of business model, right? But it wasn't really prioritizing streaming. It definitely had, I think it did a decent job with like Matt Walsh's show, and I know they had some other people that were doing some streaming there. But But yeah, that's sort of the idea. Steven Crowder at one point said, I want a network of people I'll be willing to help conservative streamers, and nothing that I know of came of it. Thank you, Senper. I appreciate it, Senper Tick. But even still, I think my other content would be better if I had more time. Can you imagine if I had money? Like, as amazing as Black Elk is, Black Elk's in a similar position as me. Black Elk's got a lot of stuff going on in his life. Imagine that he could get paid a full-time wage by a company to be my editor, that I could have a studio put up with like top of the line equipment, paid full time to do it. Imagine how good the show would be. And it doesn't have to be me or just me. Imagine that you're reaching out to 5-6 conservatives. Imagine that Fabian Liberty got that deal. Just sort of put libertarian perspectives out there. Imagine that Good Logic got that deal. Imagine that Lecture Fan got that deal. EOD, whoever, right? All of these conservative streamers, all of us have jobs. All of us do this as a hobby. Then you see people like Vaush, Destiny, all these people on the left. Andrew Wilson's a guy who does this full time now. Look at how his content has not only increased, but the quality of it. Look how much he's grown because he could do it full time. I'm not saying that's the only reason. I think he's talented and he's hitting an audience he's really speaking to. But that just goes to show you. Imagine how less successful Andrew would be if he had to work 50, 60 hours a week. So, I think that when I hear groups like Progressive Victory, I don't actually begrudge what they're doing. I think it's intelligent. You should. The Democrats are smart. Progressives are smart to say, okay, new media is going to be important. You hear them saying it. Now they're acting like, well, if only we had our own Joe Rogan. Well, you did. His name was Joe Rogan. Almost all of these podcasts were like center left. You ostracized him. Andrew asks, thanks so much for becoming a member for the 5th month. Says, you're a master debater, Rob. The best, I think. Thank you. We'll see. I'll get blown out tomorrow, and then you'll be like, this guy's a bum. Nah, I think I'll do fine tomorrow. But, yeah, Captain Phoenix says, imagine working backbreaking manual labor. That's why I mothballed my podcast. Yeah, that's just it. I'm doing the type of labor that it's not physically demanding most days, once in a blue moon. But it's mentally draining, but I'm able to compartmentalize. But if you're out there working a farm 9 to 5, you can clean yourself up, have dinner, get a shower, and come up and start streaming about politics for 2 hours? Probably not. Thanks, Black Jaden. Yes, the master debater jokes. I've heard them. I've told this story. I'll tell the story real quick. I went to this debate tournament that was our assistant coach's alma mater. I think it was Central Michigan University. It was a different style debate. So we just kind of went up just to test it out. And it was basically an excuse for her to go to her alma mater. So I went there, and the night before the tournament started, because I wasn't 21, I stayed basically at these dorms. And then the people that were 21 from our school all went out to dinner and like to a bar or whatever. So I was hanging out in these dorms, and they had a party. And so I'm hanging out with all these people at this party, and I'm pretty sociable. So I'm talking to these people, and they're like, oh, who are you? And I was like, oh, I'm here for this debate tournament. And they're all like drunk, like, oh, you're a master debater. And the joke I'd always say when people say that is like, yeah, I want to get shirts that says Clan University debate, we're master debaters. And then on the back it says, and we also jerk off a lot. And they're all like, ha ha ha. This is a joke I told a million times. Anyways, the next day, we're at the tournament, and round 1 or 2 of the tournament happened. Now it's about 11 o'clock or noon. So I'm sitting with our assistant coach at this university. She introduces me to a couple of her old professors. So it's just me and like my assistant coach and 2 of these professors standing in a hallway of this university, and classes let out. And so, maybe 20, 30 people in the aisles walking towards the exit or into their next classroom or whatever. And this guy, as I'm talking to these professors, is like, hey, it's that guy that jerks off a lot. And I'm like, ha. And my assistant coach is just like, eyes are like this big. She's like, what? I was like, yeah, it's just a joke. Never mind. Needless to say, she was not too happy that this got brought up in front of her professors. But life goes on. So, all right, I'm out of here for this evening. We'll see you back here for a debate tomorrow night. Very excited. I don't get to do many debates anymore. Also, I enjoy Jake Rattlesnake. I think it'll be a good debate, be moderated well. My goal is, what I'm trying to do overarching with my channel for various reasons to make myself more friendly to possibly becoming a streamer full time, is I'm not going to change who I am, but I am trying two things. One is to swear less. I definitely want to do that. Because if you do get hired, for example, if the Blaze would hire me, or if the Daily Wire would hire me, or anywhere else, they might have conditions like, hey man, we don't want you dropping the F-bomb every other word. A curse word here and there is fine, but let's hold back on the swears. So I'm trying to show that I'm capable of doing that, which I am capable of doing. So I'm going to start cutting out the swears. The other thing is, I think that I've made a decision that I'm going to do a better effort to be less fiery in some of my debates. On the regular shows, that's fine, but in the debates, I'm going to try to be more analytic. It doesn't mean that I won't raise my intensity with my opponents, but that's the goals that I'm going to go in stylistically with tomorrow. So that's the goal. So, all righty, we'll see you all tomorrow night around 7:45 p.m. Eastern time. All the channels you're watching now, I'll be on. Looking forward to it. Thank you to everyone who donated. Thank you to my editor, Black Elk. Remember, keep checking out YouTube for those videos that he's editing and putting up every day. He's doing a fantastic job with it. He really is. So thank you so much, everyone. As always, have a good one.